Welcome back to the listening room. Some stories begin with a mystery, others begin with an invitation. Tonight's begins with a wish. A simple object, three wishes, and a warning that no sensible person should ignore. It has been more than a century since W. Jacobs first published The Monkey's Paw, yet its quiet, creeping dread remains as powerful today as it was in 1902. Because this is not a story about monsters, it is a story about hope, about grief, and about the terrible cost of trying to change what fate has already decided. So settle in. The fire is warm, the rain is falling outside, and someone is knocking at the door. This is the monkey's paw. Outside, the night was wild. Rain lashed against the windows. The wind rushed through the bare branches of the trees, making them scrape softly against the panes. Inside Laburnum Villa, everything felt wonderfully warm. The fire burned brightly in the grate. A kettle murmured on the hob. The curtains were drawn tight against the weather, turning the little sitting room into a world of its own. At the chessboard near the fire sat Mr. White, deep in concentration, though anyone watching closely might have noticed that his attention wandered more often to the window than to the pieces before him. Across from him, his son Herbert smiled with quiet amusement. His father was an enthusiastic player, but not an especially careful one. Check, Mr. White frowned. Nonsense. Herbert leaned back in his chair. I'm afraid it is. Mr. White studied the board, moved a piece, and immediately realized his mistake. Herbert laughed. I warned you not to take unnecessary risks. Mr. White looked towards the front window, where the rain continued to beat against the glass. I only hope he finds the road in weather like this. Mrs. White looked up from her knitting. If anyone can, Sergeant Major Morris can. Herbert smiled. He has travelled half the world, and he'll have plenty of stories. A few moments later, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed along the garden path. Then came a firm knock at the door. Mr. White hurried to answer it. When he returned, he was followed by a broad-shouldered man whose face had been darkened by years beneath foreign suns. His military coat glistened with rain. His thick beard was flecked with grey. Though only in middle age, his eyes belonged to someone who had seen far more than most men ever should. Sergeant Major Morris greeted the family warmly, accepted a glass of whisky, and settled comfortably before the fire. Almost immediately, conversation turned towards India. Mr. White had heard many of these stories before, yet never seemed to tire of them. Morris spoke of vast cities, ancient temples, jungles where the trees grew so thick that daylight barely touched the ground, and deserts stretching farther than the eye could see. Herbert listened with fascination. Mrs. White smiled politely. Though she occasionally questioned whether Morris had embroidered certain adventures over the years, if he had, he did so convincingly. Several glasses later, Mr. White leaned forward. You once mentioned something rather curious. Morris looked at him. The monkey's paw? For the first time that evening, the sergeant major hesitated. His expression changed, not dramatically, just enough that the room seemed a little quieter. He reached slowly into his pocket. There, resting upon his broad palm, lay something so small that it seemed almost ridiculous. It was shriveled, brown, dry as old leather. A tiny monkey's paw curled tightly upon itself. Herbert laughed softly. That's it? Morris did not smile. It seemed impossible that anything so ordinary, so dried, so shriveled, so utterly insignificant could command the attention of everyone in the room. Herbert leaned forward first. So that's the famous monkey's paw. Morris nodded once. It is. Mrs. White smiled. It doesn't look very magical. No, his voice was quiet now. It doesn't. He turned it over carefully between his fingers. The spell was placed upon it by an old fakir. A holy man? Yes. He wished to prove something. Mr. White looked intrigued. What was that? Morris stared into the fire before answering. That fate ruled people's lives. He spoke slowly, as though repeating words he had considered many times, and that those who interfered with fate did so to their sorrow. The room fell silent. Outside, a gust of wind rattled the windows. The fire shifted, sending a shower of tiny sparks dancing up the chimney. The fakir enchanted the paw so that three separate men could each have three wishes. Herbert laughed. Only three? Three. And they all came true? They did. The sergeant major's expression did not change. Every one of them. Mr. White reached out. And you? Morris looked at the little paw in his hand. I was the second man. No one spoke. Even Herbert's smile faded. You had your three wishes? I did. And they came true? They came true. Mrs. White leaned forward gently. Then why don't you tell us what you wished for? For several long moments, Morris simply watched the flames. When he finally answered, his voice was almost lost beneath the crackling fire. I'd rather not. No one pressed him. There was something in his face, something weary, something deeply regretted that discouraged further questions. At last, Mr. White asked quietly, what happened to the first man? Morris closed his hand around the paw. He had his three wishes. And the last one he swallowed was for death. Silence. Complete silence. Even Herbert, who until now had treated the whole affair as a pleasant story for a rainy evening, found nothing amusing to say. After a while, Mr. White attempted a smile. If the wishes came true, why don't you make three more? Morris gave a short, humorless laugh. Have I not had enough? He looked again at the shriveled paw. Then, quite suddenly, he stood. Without warning, he tossed it directly into the fire. Mrs. White gasped. The tiny object disappeared among the glowing coals. Mr. White reacted instantly. He reached into the grate, snatched the paw from the flames, and quickly shook the ashes from it. What are you doing? Morris demanded sharply. Let it burn. Mr. White examined it carefully. It doesn't seem damaged. I threw it there for a reason. He stepped closer. If you keep it, don't blame me for what happens. Mr. White smiled uneasily. You don't truly believe that? I don't know what I believe anymore. The sergeant major picked up his glass, finished the last of the whiskey, and prepared to leave. At the front door, he hesitated. If you must wish, he looked directly at Mr. White, wish for something sensible. Then, without another word, he stepped into the rain. The family watched him disappear into the darkness beyond the gate. For several moments, no one moved. Only the sound of the wind filled the little house. Finally, Herbert laughed. Well, that was certainly dramatic. Mrs. White smiled. I imagine 21 years in India gives a man plenty of imagination. Mr. White still held the monkey's paw. He turned it over thoughtfully. It feels perfectly ordinary. Herbert grinned. Of course it does. If it looked magical, someone else would have bought it years ago. Mrs. White returned to her knitting. So, what exactly are you supposed to do? Mr. White searched his memory. I believe Morris said, he frowned, you hold it in your right hand and wish aloud. Herbert burst into laughter. That's wonderfully convenient. He leaned back dramatically. Very well, father, go ahead. Mr. White looked embarrassed. Don't be ridiculous. No, really. Herbert pointed towards a little object. Wish for something. Mrs. White joined in. We could start with enough money to pay off the house. Herbert nodded enthusiastically. Exactly. He looked around the modest sitting room. 200 pounds should do it. Mr. White chuckled. It would indeed. He looked down once more at the monkey's paw. Outside, the wind howled around Laburnum Villa. Inside, the fire burned warmly. Everything remained peaceful, ordinary, safe. Slowly, almost sheepishly, He lifted the little paw in his right hand. I wish, he smiled at his family, for 200 pounds. The words had scarcely left his lips when he cried out. The paw twisted violently in his hand like a living thing. Mr. White dropped it instantly. His face had gone pale. It moved. Herbert bent down, picked it up, and examined it carefully. I don't see anything. It twisted. Mr. White's voice remained unsteady. I swear, it twisted. Herbert smiled reassuringly. I expect that's because you've had Morris's stories filling your imagination. Mrs. White laughed softly, and perhaps one whiskey too many. Gradually, the strange moment passed. Conversation returned. The fire burned lower. Soon the family prepared for bed, still joking about unexpected fortunes arriving by mysterious means. No one noticed as the last lamp was extinguished that the little monkey's paw lay upon the mantelpiece, perfectly still, waiting. Morning arrived bright and unexpectedly cheerful. The rain had washed the countryside clean. Sunlight streamed through the windows of Lavenham Villa, making the previous evening seem almost absurd. At breakfast, the monkey's paw became the subject of good-humored teasing. Herbert buttered a slice of toast and grinned at his father. Well, Mr. White looked up. Well, what? Has the 200 pounds arrived? Mrs. White laughed. Perhaps you're waiting for the post. Herbert shook his head dramatically. No, if I know magical monkeys, they're probably bringing it in sacks. Mr. White smiled, though his eyes wandered briefly towards the mantelpiece. The shriveled paw remained exactly where he had left it, dry, silent, entirely ordinary. I still tell you, he said quietly. It moved. Mrs. White reached across the table and squeezed his hand. So would I if I'd spent an evening listening to Sergeant Major Morris. The conversation drifted elsewhere. Soon breakfast ended. Herbert collected his coat, kissed his mother lightly upon the forehead, and reached for his hat. Don't spend the money before I get home. Mr. White chuckled. If it arrives, I'll try not to. And if you hear strange knocking, Herbert paused theatrically at the door. Perhaps don't answer it. Mrs. White threw a folded napkin in his direction. Off with you. Still laughing, Herbert stepped outside. The front door closed. His cheerful whistle floated back through the open gate, then faded into the distance. The little house became wonderfully quiet. There are few things slower than an ordinary afternoon, especially when nothing remarkable happens. Mr. White spent several hours tending the garden. Mrs. White busied herself with household work. The monkey's paw remained forgotten upon the mantelpiece. Once or twice, Mr. White caught himself glancing towards it. Each time, he laughed inwardly at his own foolishness. What had he expected? A mysterious stranger carrying a bag of gold? Coins falling down the chimney? The wish, he assured himself, had been nothing more than a joke. And yet, every now and then, he remembered this strange sensation, that tiny unmistakable movement, like fingers briefly tightening around his own. Late in the afternoon, Mrs. White happened to glance through the front window. There is someone coming. Mr. White looked up from his newspaper. A man stood outside the gate. He wore a neatly pressed black coat. His hat remained in his hands. For several moments, he seemed unable to decide whether to approach the house. Twice he walked towards the gate. Twice he turned away. Finally, with obvious effort, he entered the garden. Something about his hesitation made the room suddenly colder. He knocked softly. Mrs. White hurried to answer, smoothing her apron as she went. The visitor bowed politely. I hope I'm not intruding. Not at all. He stepped inside, still holding his hat tightly, still avoiding their eyes. My name, he hesitated, is Mr. Sampson. I represent Maw and Meggins. At the mention of Herbert's employers, Mr. White smiled. Has something happened at the factory? The visitor lowered his eyes. I was asked, he swallowed, to call. Mrs. White's smile faded. Is Herbert hurt? No. A pause. He is not in any pain. The words hung in the room. Mr. White rose slowly. What do you mean? The representative twisted his hat nervously. There has been another pause. An accident. Mrs. White took one step forward. An accident? Mr. Sampson nodded. The machinery. No one spoke. He was caught. The fire cracked quietly. Somewhere outside, a bird continued singing, unaware that anything in the world had changed. Mr. Sampson's voice had almost become a whisper. He suffered no pain. Mrs. White looked at him without understanding. Then, very slowly, she understood. No, it was hardly more than a breath. No. Mr. White reached blindly toward the table, steadying himself. The room seemed suddenly too small, too silent. The visitor continued, his voice trembling. Ma and Meggins accept no responsibility. He stopped, ashamed even to pronounce the words. But they wish to offer you a certain sum. Mr. White stared at him. How much? The representative could barely lift his eyes. 200 pounds. Silence. Complete, absolute silence. The words echoed through the little sitting room. Not loudly, not dramatically, simply, inescapably. 200 pounds. Exactly the amount wished for. Mr. White's face became strangely empty. His hands searched the air before him, as though reaching for something already gone. Then, without a sound, he collapsed to the floor. Mrs. White gave one terrible cry. The monkey's paw remained upon the mantelpiece, exactly where it had always been. Days passed, then weeks, then another week. Laburnum Villa became quieter than it had ever been. Herbert's laughter no longer echoed through the little house. His chair remained empty. His boots still stood beside the door. His pipe lay untouched upon the mantel. Mrs. White could not bring herself to move any of them. Grief has strange habits. Sometimes it arrives like a storm. Sometimes it settles silently into every corner of a home until one no longer notices its presence. The 200 pounds had been paid. The mortgage was cleared. The house belonged entirely to Mr. and Mrs. White. Neither of them ever spoke of the money. To do so would have been unbearable. The cemetery stood nearly 2 miles from the house, across muddy fields, past the old church, beyond rows of wind-bent trees. Mrs. White visited almost every day. She remained there for hours, sitting quietly before Herbert's grave, sometimes speaking softly, sometimes saying nothing at all. Mr. White accompanied her whenever he could, though increasingly he found himself unable to bear the place. The fresh earth, the white stone, the impossible silence. He preferred remembering Herbert alive, smiling, teasing, laughing beside the fire. Nearly a month after Herbert's funeral, the two of them sat once again before the dying fire. Neither had spoken for some time. Outside, the wind had returned, not violent, only persistent, moving through the trees with a long, restless sigh. Mrs. White suddenly looked up. The monkey's paw. Mr. White frowned. What about it? It has 2 wishes left. His face changed immediately. No. You wished once? Yes, and it came true. I wish it never had. Mrs. White stood, her breathing quickened. Then why should we not wish again? Mr. White stared at her. Slowly, horribly, he realized what she meant. No. You're afraid. I am. She crossed the room. Her eyes searched desperately. Where is it? I threw it away. No, you kept it. Without another word, she hurried to the mantel. There, half hidden behind a photograph, lay the little shriveled paw. She lifted it eagerly. Mr. White rose at once. Give it to me. No, you don't know what you're asking. I know exactly. She held the little object towards him. Wish. I cannot. Wish. His voice broke. Our son has been dead for nearly 10 days. Mrs. White closed her eyes. I don't care. He was, Mr. White could barely continue, terribly hurt. I don't care. I saw him. I don't care. The words burst from her with such force that the room seemed to shake. Bring him back. Then very slowly Mr. White took the monkey's paw. His hands trembled violently. He could scarcely lift it. Mrs. White stood before him, her eyes fixed upon the tiny object. Wish. Almost in a whisper, he spoke. I wish, the fire flickered, my son alive again. Nothing happened. The paw remained cold, dry, and motionless. Mr. White dropped it immediately. There, it is done. Neither spoke. Minutes passed. The wind sighed softly around the house. The clock continued ticking. The fire settled to glowing embers. Mrs. White waited, listening. Nothing. At last, Mr. White breathed deeply. You see, it was only imagination. He reached towards the lamp. We should try to sleep. Mrs. White nodded slowly. Though disappointment shadowed her face, she allowed him to lead her upstairs. The bedroom overlooked the front garden. Beyond it stretched the lonely road, silver beneath pale moonlight. Neither slept. Mr. White lay awake, watching branches move against the window, listening to every sound the old house made. Beside him, Mrs. White stared into darkness. Then, a knock, so soft that it might almost have been mistaken for the wind. Both remained perfectly still. Another knock, slightly louder. Mrs. White sat upright instantly. Did you hear that? Mr. White's heart began to pound. It was nothing. Again, knock, knock, knock. This time there could be no mistake. Someone stood at the front door. The knocking came again. Slow, deliberate, heavy enough to shake the old front door. Mrs. White gave a cry unlike any Mr. White had ever heard. Not fear, hope. Pure, desperate, impossible hope. It is Herbert. Before he could stop her, she was already out of bed. Her bare feet hurried across the wooden floor. The bedroom door flew open. She rushed towards the staircase. Mr. White remained frozen. His blood seemed suddenly cold. Not Herbert. No, not Herbert. His mind returned unwillingly to the factory, to Mr. Sampson, to the words he had spoken. He was caught in the machinery. Mr. White had not been permitted to see the body for long, only briefly, only enough to identify his son. The memory returned with terrible clarity. If the monkey's paw had truly granted the second wish, then whatever stood outside the house had travelled nearly 2 miles from the cemetery. Another knock, louder now. Mrs. White reached the front hall. I'm coming. She struggled with the heavy bolts securing the old front door. Her hands shook so violently that she could scarcely grasp them. Behind her, Mr. White stumbled down the stairs. For God's sake, he could barely force the words from his lips. Don't let it in. She turned towards him, her face transformed by grief and hope together. It is my boy. You don't know that. I do. The knocking came again, this time more urgent. Bang, bang, bang. The whole house seemed to tremble. Mrs. White pulled frantically at the lower bolt. It refused to move. It stuck. She laughed, almost hysterically. The bolt is stuck. Mr. White looked widely across the room. The monkey's paw. Where had he dropped it? He remembered. The sitting room. He rushed towards the fireplace. His hands searched blindly across the carpet, among the shadows beneath the chair. Another tremendous blow landed upon the front door. Mrs. White cried out, Herbert, wait, I'm coming. The upper chain rattled free. Only the final lock remained. Mr. White fell to his knees, still searching. His fingers swept across the floorboards. Nothing. The knocking grew louder still. Not hurried, not angry, simply persistent, as though whatever waited outside possessed endless patience. At last, his fingers touched something. The monkey's paw. Cold, dry, exactly as before. He seized it. Behind him, Mrs. White finally forced the last bolt loose. The front door began to open. Without rising, without even looking towards the entrance, Mr. White clutched the paw tightly in his right hand. His voice was scarcely audible. I wish, my last wish, that whatever has come may go away. Silence. Complete silence. Then knocking stopped. The wind alone remained. Mrs. White pulled the front door fully open. Moonlight spilled across the threshold. The empty road stretched away into darkness. The gate moved gently in the breeze. The trees whispered softly beyond the garden wall. No footsteps, no figure, no sound. Nothing. Mrs. White stood motionless, her hands rested upon the open door. She stared into the night for a long, long time. Then, very slowly, she sank to the floor. Mr. White remained where he was, still holding the monkey's paw. When at last he looked down, it had become nothing more than a shriveled piece of leather. Whatever power had lived within it, if power there had been, had departed forever. The fire burned low. The wind moved quietly through the empty garden. Somewhere beyond the fields, beneath fresh earth, a young man continued to rest. And Laburnum Villa, which had briefly imagined it could bargain with fate, returned once more to silence. Some stories leave us with answers. The monkey's paw leaves us with a question. Was it truly magic? Or did grief make ordinary events seem extraordinary? W. Jacobs never tells us. He simply reminds us that there are gifts we should never ask for, doors we should never open, and wishes that are best left unspoken. That was The Monkey's Paw by W. Jacobs, read right here as a listening room edition. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, subscribe so you never miss an episode. Until next time, sleep well and be careful what you wish for.